Depending on when you see this, it was 2 episodes ago that you and I drove the 12th generation of Toyota Corolla. Now, there were 2 things I did not tell you in that episode. Number 1, where the car is manufactured, and that would be 2 plants, one in Blue Springs, Mississippi, and it's not just cars for the US that are manufactured there, it's cars that are exported to other regions of the world, with the exception of one, and that is the other thing I did not tell you about in the previous episode. There is a hybrid version of the Corolla, and that you and I are going to drive today. So let's go once again to our secret track in Savannah and drive a Toyota Corolla Hybrid on a racetrack. So that's Ryan Turk that just cut me off with the Corolla drift car. How dare he? See you, buddy. We should be driving that Corolla, not the hybrid, but them's the brakes. Anyway, while we say goodbye to him, let's talk about something rather important, and it does impact driving dynamics, the battery. So it's a nickel metal hydride. It's not the lithium ion. We talked about this in the difference between the Avalon hybrid and the ES hybrid. Here they continue with that Toyota theme of the nickel metal hydride. But what's most important is the placement. It sits underneath the back seat like the Avalon. I would argue by strategically putting the battery low in the back of the car, it takes the majority of that weight difference, 140 pounds, and it gets it out of the way. So when you do push it harder around here, the thing you don't notice is the addition of the battery. Under the hood, it's not just the additional propulsion system and a battery that's the difference. It's a different engine. It's a 1.8 inline 4-cylinder gasoline engine. That's good for a whopping 121 horsepower, comes in at 5,200 RPM, and the torque sounds like 1970s era Triumph, 105, comes in at 3,600 RPM. However, it's a hybrid, and where the difference really lies is in the electric motor, and that adds 53 kilowatts or 71 horsepower that comes from zero. So how does that work on a track? We're down about 50 horsepower there over that internal combustion engine Corolla we drove in the last episode, and this is up 140 pounds, so it's 3,050 pounds. With that in mind, let's try to push it a little harder on our closed circuit on Savannah Island, or whatever they call this island. Yeah, it takes more time and energy to motivate, but the thing you notice is it makes a lot of noise. The NVH changes in this. Remember back in the day when hybrids used to have a completely different suspension system, at least in the back, to make room for the packaging of a raft of batteries, a complex electrical propulsion system, and whatever else went with the hybrid. Well, that's mainly changed. However, there are holdouts like Hyundai and Kia where they have a different suspension system in the back of like that Kona. Here, everything's the same, so it still has the struts in the front with stabilizer bars, multi-link in the back. The diameter of the front rotor is 10.8, diameter of the rear rotor is 10.2. There really is only one difference, and that's the transmission, and at that, not a huge difference in that it's a CVT, but they take out that first gear that's in the internal combustion engine. Oh, and the wheels, anything you want, as long as they're 15s. Let's push a little harder on these 2 turns here. Don't tell anybody because I'm not supposed to be going this fast. The composure breaks down. You don't necessarily feel the extra 140 pounds. I think that's what we're looking for here. The delta in the weight between the hybrid and the internal combustion engine is now so low, you barely notice it when you switch to the hybrid. I think the thing you notice the most is really the handoff rather than an impact on the driving dynamics. It dawned on me, this is not the first time you and I are driving a hybrid on a racetrack. We did this once before in Canada about 1.5 years ago. However, there is not much in common between these 2 vehicles other than 2 propulsion systems. That had 600 plus horsepower, cost $250,000, and we never discussed fuel economy in that episode. Here I feel it would be more prudent for the reason for being of this vehicle to discuss fuel economy, and that would be 53 in the city, 52 on the highway, and a big shocker of shockers, 52 average. So with that, let's get back to driving this hybrid on a racetrack. And lap number 3 on the track. This time we need to focus on that transmission. Where it's most noticeable is not from a complete dead stop, it's in mid-range. So as I come out of this turn, as a matter of fact, I'll take my foot off the accelerator, push a little harder here. This is where you're asking for some mid-range power. That's where you feel a little bit of a delay in this transmission as opposed to the internal combustion engine derivation, the Corolla. As we come to a stop here, I'm gonna say it. There are other hybrids out there that have real geared transmissions, namely Hyundais and Kias, not so much the Porsches that we've driven, that are direct competitors to this. And they work incredibly well. The personality is suited to, say, an 8 or 9 speed transmission. I would argue that's one area of improvement that this can use without impacting the overall fuel economy, which is the reason for being in these things. Admittedly, I spend a hell of a lot of time in these episodes focusing on the weight difference between a hybrid electric version like this and an internal combustion engine version of any given car, not just Toyotas. And yeah, we talked about where the battery is in the back seat, the weight difference being 140 pounds, but here is an example of how they limit the weight difference. It's the packaging of the power control unit. So normally in a hybrid, this would be off to the side and it's a big honking unit. Here, they've made it smaller and packaged it with the CVT, so the overall unit underneath the hood is A, smaller, and the weight penalty is less. Sadly, let's get off the track and go and find some traffic. And there's a great opportunity here in Savannah. If you guys know this area, there is this beautiful, relatively new bridge, the Talmadge Bridge, which goes over the water, takes you right into downtown Savannah. So it's a beautiful suspension structure. Anyway, it's come around here, merge with some traffic, and we've got a nice uphill dig deep here to try to catch up with this truck, and it's working pretty hard to get there. It's trying to pull all 3,050 pounds up this, it's not a steep incline, but it's a long, painful incline. If you've ever run the New York City Marathon, the first 2 miles are exactly like this. The big thing that you notice, and you can hear it as I push it harder over this bridge, and as you can see downtown Savannah over there, is the NVH. That's the big difference between internal combustion engine and hybrid application in a Corolla. So I got a friend named Sam. Sam works for Toyota. He's a good guy, he likes cars. He kind of runs this product. We had a discussion earlier and he tells me you can't get a sunroof in the hybrid, but you can in the gas car. So 2 things. Number 1, would you like to write a note in the comments below? Dear Sam, we'd like a sunroof in the hybrid. That would be lovely. Can you sort it out for us? And number 2, there's like this safety tech thing that Sam put in the sunroof in the gas car. Let me show it to you. So let's say you put your hand or other extremities through the sunroof. I don't know what it would be besides your hand. Watch what happens. So here's the script. You hit the button here to close the sunroof, but then you put your arm in between the glass panel and the roof, it bounces back. Nice trick, Sam. I do need to point something out as we sit here at MLK Boulevard and Oglethorpe, I believe is the name of this street. One of the few cars in this class that is fitted with a hold system. You know, the brake system where you take your foot off the brake when you're sitting at an intersection. Something that's usually in fancy cars. Nice touch to have it in effectively a $20,000 car. This one's 23, but nice to see. Arigato gozaimasu. In the episode where we featured this car, I shared a bit of the history of the Corolla with you guys, but there was one piece I held back, and that's where the car had been manufactured over all of those 53 years. And it started out in 1966 at the Takaoka, Japan plant. My apologies for the pronunciation there. However, it's still being manufactured at that same plant. But what I find so fascinating, almost kind of funny, like the OG car that started at the OG plant is now still being manufactured there, but it's no longer the OG car. It's the most high-tech version of the Corolla for worldwide production comes out of this plant, and that would be the hybrid. Full EV. Let's try going around here, see if this works. Wonder how fast you have to go when it turns off. Oh, that was 20 miles an hour, it turns off. Not very useful around town. This would be nice to see this work, I don't know, up to 40, maybe 50 miles an hour, so you could use it around town. But then I think you're probably asking for a lot in that, because then what would change the price of the car? Because you'd have to add the battery, change the weight. There's so much that would change. It probably would change the focus of the vehicle rather than the cost of the vehicle. So no matter how many fancy cars you drive, this is still your lot in life when Cleo, the Queen of Claremont, Ontario, runs the show. After I drove the hybrid Corolla in Savannah, I came up to see her, shared some of my notes with her, and she wasn't particularly pleased about my feeling that the NVH is a problem here in this derivation of a Toyota Group hybrid. Because the last three we drove, the UX, the ES, and the LS, I always thought that they were in the hunt. In the case of the UX, that was definitely the better choice over the ICE. And the ES, it's kind of a push. Me, I would probably do the hybrid version in the ES. Well, she wasn't satisfied, and she felt it's more about numbers. So we found out the price, the base price of an ICE Corolla, $19,500, and we found out the base price of the HEV Corolla when we drove in this episode is $22,950, so it's about $3,500 difference, $3,450 to be exact. So we took the average price, or really the average miles, the average mileage people drive in the US, 15,000 miles a year. She found the average price of a gallon of gas currently at the end of February of 2019 is $3. I know, thank you for the kiss, thank you. You're such a sweetheart, I know. And we found that to get payback on that investment, that $3,450 investment, it's 6.138 years to make up that $3,500. But then Caesar over here said, what if we drive a lot of mileage? So we did the same computation with 30,000 miles a year, and that came to 3.1 years. So at the end of the day, you gotta be either an Uber driver or carting around some kids that have to go long distances to get payback, and you still have the issue of the NVH. It's not great. I would argue this version of the hybrid is not in the hunt, especially when you're talking about the numbers at $19,500 for the base IC, and you still get pretty good fuel economy. So I'm going to turn this around to you and not really ask you which one would you choose, but how many miles a year do you really do, and what kind of driving do you do? Do you cart big dogs around, rugrats, or do you drive Uber? Let me know in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV on Word, MotoManTV on Word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, Cleo and Caesar and I are going to go out in the snow because right now, Greater Toronto is getting socked with wind and snow. But are they phased? Absolutely not. So see you next time. Bis später. Now we're getting into downtown Savannah here. This is Forrest Gump's park. This is where he sat on the bench waiting for the bus. The bench is now in the interior of the park, but you can see just how stunning this city is. The combination of the architecture, the natural beauty of nature, and then of course, the food. A missed meal in Savannah is a missed opportunity.